And it's more so than just an opportunity to get pilots. It's really a reframing or a sort of a mindset around innovation and finding these innovative opportunities and innovative things that people have been developing, and doing those things, and also coming up with some new things that people want to do. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is develop something that's going to occur outside of the brick and mortar of school. So, we are all doing that to some degree right now through remote learning. I mean, not all. I imagine most of the people work with kids that are, somewhat remote. And that's something that, we literally had to reinvent that overnight. I mean, there was some foundations around that, but really had to reinvent how we're going to deliver content in a matter of a few short days. And a testament to all of us, we've done a really good job of spinning that and making that pivot much faster than I think we could have ever imagined we'd be able to. So this is designed to capture both those practices, as well as just sort of the spirit of where that came from, and that mindset of being able to be innovative and think about new things. I had a teacher, I was a principal until about a month and a half ago, and I had a teacher come up to me in April and say, you really can teach an old dog new tricks, because I've been doing this for 40 years. And I think I've learned more in the last month than I have in the last, 15 years. So, that spirit of like, we have the obligation to be innovative. Let's capture that. So that's what this is really all about. And so there's a couple of different aspects to it. One is that we are designing some courses. Go ahead, Beth. Are you raising your hand? Oh, okay. And the rest of the team, feel free to interrupt me. I encourage it. So there's three real prongs to this three-pronged approach. The first is that we are working with higher ed organizations. We actually have one of the professors is here. Hello, Jason. So that's one of the professors, and we have people that are working on what is called pilot design courses. And a lot of you who have already registered for Innovation 510, if you were able to do that, that's the course you're taking. So that's a pilot design course where you will learn some innovative practices to design a specific pilot that you would potentially be able to implement at your school. So those are credit-bearing classes that you would take through a university. We're working with the Foster Center, working with Farmington, working with a number of other organizations to be able to offer those credit-bearing classes. And that's like an 8-week class that would meet, everything's remote, because I don't know if you heard, but we're in a pandemic. So everything's remote, but those are the 8-week classes where you would learn some of the real specific things to develop a pilot. And ultimately, you would leave those credit-bearing classes with a pilot that you developed with a team of other educators from your school or not from your school. It really depends on where the need and what the interest level is. So that would be something, so you develop those pilots that would then get uploaded to a portal called Engine. And we're in the process of developing that. So you would develop your pilot, and then you would essentially share it with the RREV program. We would put it on a portal called Engine, and that Engine would be a resource or a collaborative hub for everybody who has taken who has been a part of RREV. So Engine is sort of a collaborative hub, and you as educators can look through Engine and develop and see, you know what, I really like what I did. I think my pilot is super cool, but I think the one that Jacob Bogar created from Farmington is even cooler. I want to do that one. So maybe my team will work together and implement that one. So it's really just a resource and a collaborative tool for people to use. And so you develop you implement one of those pilots. You have the responsibility as someone who's a part of this program to talk about your experience, and then other people can come after you and iterate on that experience. So the one, Jacob Bogart's cool pilot in 10 years from now will have several, hopefully countless iterations of that. So that spirit, that essence is like the start of the thought process, is of the evolution of these pilots. So that's the pilot program, and there's more to that, but that's where the credit-bearing classes come from. And hopefully, and we will very soon have enough credit-bearing classes for hundreds of teachers. We're working on that. So if you are currently on a waiting list, we're doing everything we can to kind of get the next step so you'll be able to actually be enrolled in those credit-bearing classes. The second element is the innovative principles classes. These are a little bit shorter. These are asynchronous classes being offered through nonprofits and through a couple of other organizations that we're working with. And these are more just to kind of get the fundamentals of design thinking, of some human-centered design, and just innovative practices so that you can be part of a team. In order to apply for pilot funding, everyone needs to have an administrator, ideally, and a teacher on the team. But the rest of the people on that team, and we encourage you to have teams of multiple teachers so you get more buy-in, or educators from your school. But the rest of the individuals need to at least have taken one of the pilot or the innovative principles courses, and those are asynchronous and much shorter, and those are pretty unique, and those are going to be available very shortly. We're working with folks on developing those, and those will all be asynchronous. So those are the two kind of learning experiences that we're offering for people. And, you know, our goal is pretty audacious. You know, we as a state want to reach as many teachers as we can. I mean, we have the capacity. The intent of this is to have an impact on all of Maine teachers. So we are working with some pretty large organizations to develop the tools so that we will be able to share this with as many people as possible. So, we have some pretty audacious goals, and I think that, based on my experience as a Maine educator, they're certainly attainable and definitely possible. So you guys as members of the REV kind of community will have access to the Engine portal, which is kind of the central hub. And then you'll also be expected or invited to work with each other on there. You've got a bunch of really motivated folks here. I think we should try to utilize the strengths of each other to expand on the individual pilots, but also kind of the mindsets, and there'll be some tertiary things on that portal that everyone will be able to be involved in. So that was a lot of information right there. Beth or Paige or Elaine, do you have anything to add to kind of the foundations of what is REV?
That was great, Martin.
I could not have done it all. Okay. Beth and Paige have been working on this since like June, so they're truly the experts on this. So that's really the essence of what REV is. It's really a mindset, and it's really trying to capture the spirit of what we have learned and what we over the course of the last year, and harnessing that. Because if you would have asked if you would have asked me a year ago if we could have gone entirely remote over a weekend, I would have said, why would we ever do that? And no, we definitely can't. We would need months to roll that out. Well, in reality, we didn't need months. We rolled it out pretty quickly, and we had some, innovation was coming through all sorts of different places. And it's really cool to see the different iterations that people have done with just what is remote education. We have kind of four major buckets that we're sort of looking at as far as areas of innovation. And those are, the four buckets are outdoor ed. So that's one element that we're sort of looking at. And these are like ideas that we have, but the most important one we have is the one that doesn't exist yet. So any like imagined things, that's the one that we're really looking for to see where this can go. But right now we have outdoor ed, remote learning, which we've all gotten to be pretty adept at, extended learning opportunities, and then multiple pathways. So those are really the four buckets that we have identified. And then obviously the yet to be imagined bucket, which is the one that's the most exciting for me. But we're really looking for people to go into these pilot programs with an open mind and saying, I know a lot of people probably have some ideas of things like that they'd like to do. But I'd love to see people go into these with an open mind and think about things, because the classes are designed to give you the tools to design a pilot from a different perspective than I think most of us come from. So I think that maintaining an open mind would be really a helpful key to being successful in these. Now, does anybody, so that was a lot. And again, I'll try to answer some questions, but if you have questions I can't answer, I'll be very sincere and tell you I can't answer it and get back to you. Are there any initial questions that anybody has? Mr. Wilson?
I was actually scratching my nose, but yes, I do have a question. The time frame for deliverables, Martin, can you give us an idea? So we get trained in the concept is to be trained this spring essentially, and organize and plan as teams in the summer, and like what's the expectation from your end?
Well, that's an evolving target because we got a little bit of a late start, but we have a couple of different we have a couple of different classes that are being offered right now. So there's the design, the pilot design courses are being offered right now, and that's you, an administrator and a teacher would need to at least take that. And then we were hoping to have the first course or the first set of educators implementing pilots by September of next year. Beth, do you agree with that?
Yep. And then what's great
and then so after next year, then we would be on a cycle when we have more classes available. We would have pilots being released every roughly September for 3 years. So we have this a 3-year grant we have. So we would be able to fund pilots for 3 years, starting with September being the first cycle.
And Rick, we may also, because our timeline got pushed back a little bit in the beginning, have our second cycle start in sometime in the winter, like potentially January of 22.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So again, this is a pretty significant federal grant. So we're working with them. It was written based on different timelines. So some of those timelines are negotiable, but for this first cohort, I think we were hoping to have those pilots implemented starting in September. And there will be ample time for everyone to get the training they need if they want to be a part of implementation of these pilots. Mike Felton.
Yeah, Martin, if there's a teacher, so I'm an administrator, if there's a teacher we want to share this opportunity with and get them involved, is there still time for that?
Yeah, there's definitely time, not for the first class, not for the alpha class, but there's a waiting list that is certainly not full at this point. So yeah, we can share. Mike, I'll make sure that all of the people on this meeting have access. And maybe Elaine, can you put a list or a link to the waiting list in the chat? Great, thank you so much. So yeah, Mike, that's a great question, but no, it's, and I want people to realize that if you are, some of you may be really busy right now. So if you want to wait another year and do this, then this isn't going anywhere except for towards awesome.
And Jacob's got his hand up.
Mr. Bogar?
How you doing?
Good.
Could you clarify, I thought when you were first talking that the administrators may need to take at least one of the innovative principal courses that are the short asynchronous courses, or do they have to take this INT 510?
They have to take some version of INT 510.
And could that come from the short asynchronous courses, or?
No, that is the bigger version of the course. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's just the challenge I'm at right now, is trying to work with administrators that are pretty strapped.
Okay.
Right? Budget season is starting right now, to kind of encourage them to come on board as well in some form. So
Jacob,
okay, yeah.
Jacob, one of the things we are trying to do is find a higher ed partner that is willing to do an asynchronous version of the larger course. So while right now, all of the smaller workshop class kind of things that are asynchronous and that are just smaller components, those are going to be asynchronous, but we are also trying to find a higher ed partner that will do the credit bearing totally asynchronous, because you are not alone as an administrator. That's been a common question. So we're working on it.
great, thanks.
And one thing to think about is there's going to be several cycles of this.
Yeah, true.
So it's not like they have to do it right now.
Right.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
Yep, no problem.
So Elaine, I'm the curriculum coordinator in RT26. I believe I stepped into prep just as you were stepping out. And our conversation at our meeting last week was really kind of pushing up against the parameters for the awarding of funding. And we were wondering if there will be any room for regional efforts, right? So we were talking about prep folks getting together and exploring a pilot that is not district specific. Will there be any room for that?
I'll try to answer that, and Beth and Paige, feel free to weigh in, because that's a topic that's come up several times. So we would need one district to be the fiscal agent of anything. If you wanted to collaborate with a neighboring district, you could certainly do that, but ultimately it would be Brunswick would be or whatever. Brunswick is an example because I live there. Brunswick would be the fiscal agent, and then Topsom and Freeport could collaborate with them. But ultimately, for our perspective, all of our correspondence and funding would go directly to Brunswick, and then they would have to internally handle that. And Beth, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm just going to add on is that if you think, we just have to think in the parameters of what the USDOE is expecting and needing for deliverables from us, which are a system innovation. And so we would just want to be able to describe it, talk about it, document it on a district level of how it sort of, what adjustments are made to the district system that then flows down into your classroom, your schools and your classrooms. But that doesn't mean that 3 districts or 2 districts can't be doing that at the same time. We just have to make sure that the way that we'll document it will be that way, because we are looking at what a district could pick up and implement. So I think there's, as Martin says, there's room for that. We just have to, we would just partner and talk about it and think about what that looks like and how we do that.
And to add to that, there is room. There's part of the pilot where you need to develop a budget, and part of that budget can be subcontractors and things along those lines as well. So there is some latitude. But Beth brought up a great point, and that's just the systems change. Like, we want folks to be thinking bigger, like on a very large scale. We're hoping to create some stuff that's going to have a long-lasting systemic impact. Something that's going to be around long after we go on to wherever we go. So it's big picture stuff that we're really hoping to capture with this.
The one thing, Meredith, I would add from the perspective of having dealt with prep is, let's hypothetically say there were 3 schools that were trying to implement a similar thing in 3 different classrooms, or even 5. If it doesn't impact systems thinking, like district-wide, like a significant change, then that's not what this is about. Because this is really, I like to think of it being a Mac person. A lot of people thought that when Steve Jobs passed away, Apple was going to fold. But the testament to the fact that it didn't is because he built a culture to change the way people strategically think about technology. And so that's what we're building, is not, if you walk away, the 3 people that implement this, if they walk away from the system, will the idea die? Then that's not innovation that we're thinking about. That's innovation on small scale, but we're talking about innovation, capital I, where it really changes the way people think about what is possible and what we can implement.
So
go ahead.
So if I were to compare this then to a remote learning version of partnership, the way that the real schools served sending districts, right? And the idea that we, have a population that needs to be served. We are serving them through our efforts alone is inefficient. So we are going to partner, and we are going to bring it to try to capture those kids, right? Like, is that because it isn't impacting one system in particular outside the bounds that you're identifying?
I'm not totally sure I understand exactly what you say.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Martin.
I was just thinking, it's pretty specific. I think it would be probably helpful to have like a one-on-one conversation with you around the specifics around this, because obviously I love your idea of creating opportunities for kids on a huge scale. We just need to figure out the details of how that would actually look.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'll follow up with you, Meredith, and we can have a conversation.
Sure.
Go ahead, Pam.
I had a question in regards to how this might get sold to the school boards.
It's free.
Yes, but I mean, in terms of approval, which would they require approval for this pilot launch as well?
It would be, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have some administrative representation on there. But, you know, so yeah, I would assume that you would probably have to go through school board approval, because you are going to be making systemic change,
Yeah, it's
big
involved curriculum.
change to your programs.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that, Pam?
I know it would involve curriculum change, and that does involve school board approval.
Yeah, so I think you'd have to defer to the school board level for that, but I imagine that the school boards would probably want to be a part of that.
Unless you
Um,
have another little germ like COVID that causes school boards to accept it whether they want to or not.
Yeah, well, we're all hoping that never happens, but yeah, so and one thing we really want to emphasize is we are looking to help support the initiation of something, but there needs to be a plan for it to sustain itself long after we're gone, or long after we're all gone. And the pilot design class has that's a pretty specific template that's going to help folks guide them through this somewhat nebulous process. So we've been working with the higher ed to help them kind of define what the specific class will look like. So if you are enrolled in that class, you are going to get the tools to kind of have these nebulous conversations with your team. So we're not just expecting people to know exactly what we're talking about, and because it's evolving for us too. We really are lucky enough to have this extremely dynamic opportunity to kind of create something that doesn't exist, and that's hard. That's really hard. So we're figuring it out as well. But I do know that if you are enrolled in the classes, there's a really specific template that will help guide the process to getting you to where you're able to implement something or design something to potentially implement. Are there any other questions or ideas, Professor Wilson?
A question about are there qualifiers about community partners that we can work with? Like, can we work only with 501c3 organizations, or can we work with for-profit groups? And
I believe we can work with anyone as long as it's legal. That came up. Yeah, as long as it's legal, we can work with them.
And we can use the money for people?
Yeah.
Hiring new staff?
Yeah.
Just remember, in this case, the money has to be spent by a certain date because the grant ends in, I think, August of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So if it was someone you hoped to have beyond then, there would have to be a plan in the school budget for that.
Right. Thanks.
Yep. Mr. Bogar?
Is there any regional appropriation? Like, is there certain areas that are going to potentially be able to receive the money? Like, is it supposed to be spread out in some way across the state?
Yeah.
Rural, urban, by county?
Yep. So it's being distributed by superintendent region. So it's $250,000 per superintendent region per course, and there are some superintendent regions that have several. What am I looking for?
Yeah, so every superintendent region per funding cycle will get one, and then the top three student population regions beyond that, and we're revisiting our student count numbers now to determine who that is, will get two $250,000 pilots per cycle in the first round, and then only 2 superintendent regions in the subsequent 2 rounds. I know that's a little confusing.
Yeah, that's helpful just to get kind of an idea. And is a superintendent region, I'm not familiar with that. Is it?
You would be like in Western Maine. There's like Cumberland, Western Maine, York. Well, yeah. So they're not necessarily by county.
There are 9 of them.
There's 9. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
I'll look it up.
Yep.
And if your district, for instance, didn't apply for the full 250,000, like you applied for 100,000, then there's 150,000 for that superintendent region left over to be used. So more than one pilot could be funded per cycle if it's not for the full 250,000.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
And priority is given to percentage of at-risk students in your district that are applying. So within that superintendent region, the way it's a willing and qualified application. And so the way sort of once you're established as being willing and qualified and you're in a superintendent region that's eligible, the district with the highest population of at-risk students would be awarded, and then it would go down, it would go from there. So if only one person applies or one district applies and they have no at-risk students, they would still be awarded because they're the only ones from that district, that superintendent region. But if 3 applied, that's how we would determine which one was funded first.
Go ahead, Lynn.
What definition of at-risk student are you using?
We're using our ESSA number, same as ESSA is used.
Okay, same as ESSA. Okay.
Yep, to keep it consistent.
What's ESSA?
It's our federal reporting accountability system that districts will report on. So we're using that same terminology and numbers in order to do that.
Are there any other questions?
So a question about smaller schools versus larger schools. It sounds like from that formula that a smaller school has less of a chance of receiving funding than a larger school?
No.
It's your percentage of them, so not compared to others. But if you only have 80 kids, but 90% of them are at risk, then you have 90%.
Yeah. And this opportunity is extended to charter schools, public schools, and private schools. Open to everybody. Great. Well, if there's no more questions, we did record this. I hope people are okay with that. But we will. Oh, thank you, Jason. So yeah, Jason, about textbooks. Did you answer that here? I can't.
No, I didn't answer, but I just wanted to clarify. There was a question from Michelle. Okay. Was that question related specifically to the courses being offered for the administrators and teachers?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I can't answer that for every course, but the course that the University of Maine is offering related to fundamentals of innovation for educators, everything will be included. You won't have to buy anything. So the grant is covering all those educational costs.
And that's true for all of them. There will be no expectation for teachers to pay out of pocket for anything.
Thank you.
Yep.
And you might have spoken to this with timeline. If you're looking to have a pilot potentially up and running by September, what's the grant award timeline leading up to that?
Beth?
Yep, sure. We hope to have the application for districts to fill out in the spring, and that would give you, and the awards would happen pretty quickly because it isn't subjective, it's an objective measures. And then you would have that spring throughout the summer to be planning and staffing if you need to, and those things.
And would you have to have already taken a course to apply, or can you be taking a course currently when you apply?
I think at that point, we're still determining that because we're hopeful. It'll depend on how many courses we're able to offer. We certainly don't want to, we'll be realistic about what that is. So if there are courses happening actively in the spring, we wouldn't want that to prohibit you from being able to apply if you were ready.
Thanks.
Just to give you a little bit of information about the courses that are, like right now, there are 2 courses. They are both full. And in that, based on the way people signed up, we're looking at between 6 and 7 school teams in each of those courses, which has about 24 people in it. So if every team came with an idea, just to give you some insight, if every team came with an idea and something they wanted to work on, then we could hypothetically walk out of here in about 8 weeks, 10 weeks time with the seed starter of over 15 different pilots. And so because success in the course is you will walk out with a pilot developed as it's ready to be in its first nugget or its first iteration. So if those hypothetical teams that came in actually completed their pilot, we could have 15 or plus ready to go into engine for people to start looking at. So, and then there's a spring course coming up. So we are in the generating stage. And so as long as folks are doing their thing in the courses and being successful and designing those pilots, then we'll have quite a bit for people to take a look at and to start to choose from for that fall turnaround.
And that on that same teams, we also want people to realize that they have some latitude. They don't have to come in with a specific team that's pre-assembled. Like if Pam, Scott, and Mike come in to different places, they really like an idea, they can work on that idea. It's really open for anyone pilot that will be from each individual, at least once from each individual superintendent agreement. But we also want people to, if they have a kindred spirit in the class, we want them to be able to support that and embrace that so that they can, really use these innovative tools. Lynn, go ahead.
Yeah. We're developing a pilot in the course. So then the application doesn't come out until after the course, and our pilot design is evaluated as part of the choosing? Or when you say objective measures in terms of is it a point system that includes the pilot design, or is it just facts about your school system?
Yeah, I think I just want to make more clear, perhaps, like that the course, you could take the course and never apply for a pilot, and your district never. One of our major goals is to build a culture of innovation in education in Maine. And honestly, we wrote this, we said we want 100% of educators to take these courses. Like that's what lives on beyond the grant, is when we get that mindset and that capacity, because then it will be happening all the time in our schools, and that's ultimately what we want. So I say that to reiterate, but but you will write a pilot that another district might look at and say, that is inspiring. I want to do that, even though they might have written a different pilot in the class. They may see yours and want to do that, or they may want to do their own that they worked on. Sort of, there's the option there. They're connected and separate at the same time. And so when it comes to a district team coming together, so you've got your teacher and your administrator have gone through the courses, and you've got you're starting to pull together who your team will be and talking about it. Our hope is that you'll look at all the different pilots and see what might align to your district or might inspire you or get your group excited. And then we anticipate that, if I write a pilot and I'm coming from a district, in the Western foothills, and I'm sort of designing it with my population in mind, and you're from, a school down in Cumberland, and you're a very different sort of makeup of your school and population, you may have some adjustments you're going to make to that pilot based on the needs and what your system has. But the overarching idea of what that is connected to the pilot. So in the application, if you were going to veer off of any of those pieces that the pilot presents, you would have the opportunity to just tell us that and show us. Most likely it will show up sort of through the way that you budget and plan your work plan out. But that's sort of how that would be. The rules from USDOE say that it has to be that we can't award them in a competition. So it needs to be, and that's what it's called, willing and qualified. So basically, if you meet the rules of willing and qualified, you're able to do it, to put it on, then you would be able to get a grant. But of course, there's limited money funding, so we can't give it to everybody who's willing and qualified. That would be everyone. So we're allowed to put in measures to prioritize that, and we did that based on the objective measures of the ESSA at-risk student population. So sorry,
Okay.
That was a long answer with a lot.
No, but I understand it much better now. Thank you.
Okay, good.
For a district like ours that we cover 3 different superintendent regions, would we just be in the region of our physical address?
I think there's flexibility there for you to say, where does your superintendent identify with their region? And if they are going to all three of their, if they're, you know, taking part in all three of their associations, then it would come down to the address of the district address as to which one they identify in. But I know that in my town that happens, we cross and our superintendent chooses which one to go into. And that's where I would say that would be the region they would identify with.
So in the event of a charter school, you would be based on the location of where you are.
Okay, thanks.
So I got kicked off the computer. Sorry about that. I had to run across the way here and jump on a new machine with Paige. Thank you for sharing, Paige.
And just to clarify, in some of the classes, there are a number of people who are just taking the class, as Beth said, because they want to start the seeds of innovation in their own mind, and they don't have a project in place. They don't have a full team, but they want to start planting those seeds personally and then maybe take it back. So that is totally fine.
So along that line, is 510 going to be offered in the summer, in the fall, and the winter moving forward?
Yes.
We currently have one already set up for spring. And then there, as Martin said, there are other higher ed partners who are looking to offer a similar class, but through their institution. And so that's the important piece for that standard pilot development, so that no matter which higher ed partner participates or offers the course, or which one you take that course with, you'll be using a similar tool. So that provides the consistency across all partners.
So yeah, and we're currently in development with several several IHEs. So, and anybody who wants to take this 510 will be able to take it. It might not be called 510 in Farmington, but it will use the same template and the same model. So, you know, ultimately it'll have a little bit of a different spin, but it'll be the same content.
With your funding cycles, you mentioned 3 funding cycles. If you're not funded in the first cycle, then do you just automatically get bumped to the next cycle? Or how does that work from cycle to cycle?
Scott, that's a great question. I think that's something that we're trying to, you know, navigate right now. So we don't have a definitive answer to that, but that's a great question. So I encourage folks to reach out to any one of us. Definitely, if you have a question, reach out to me and I'll forward it to other people if I'm not exactly sure, but I can do everything I can to get back to you as soon as possible. But, you know, get on that waiting list. Elaine put the link to the waiting list in the chat. So, and if you can reach out to me if you missed that for some reason. I really appreciate people taking time on a, you know, late in the afternoon to do this, but you know, I think it's a great opportunity to make some pretty impacting change for the students of Maine. So I appreciate you taking the time to hear us talk about it. I encourage you to reach out with any additional questions or ideas, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thanks for everybody, and have a great night, okay?
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.